No conflicts of interest.
All right,
Yes.
Chatty. All right, Chatty.
Sorry.
Are we on?
Be ready, yes.
Okay, so today's May 6, 2019. It is 12? 12? 12.
Need glasses?
And they're going. This is a special budget workshop for our proposed fiscal year 2019 and 2020 annual budget that we decided to do to continue from our last meeting. And I just want to go over the departments or the topics that we want to be sure to have, and that we will have a firm stop at 2 o'clock today. So just so that we're all on the same page, I show that we still have administrative departments, public safety, and capital projects. Is that correct? Is that what everybody is expecting to further discuss today?
Okay. We'll leave with this. We're going to start out with a
Budget
I have
simulation.
budget simulation in here of some sort.
And the budget simulation, that's right, that's right. So, we're gonna do, let's see, start with the simulation. Then would we all like to have our public safety report next?
Sure.
And then, do you want to do administrative departments or capital projects after that?
I have to confess, we didn't have all the capital projects folks be here yet,
We'll
so
put that last.
if that's
And
okay.
that might be another, we'll see what we see there, so.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. And then for administrative departments, we're going to be looking at recorder, finance, planning, and HR,
And admin,
and admin.
did find it.
Oh, and I think maybe it was just the budget simulation, which is why I put that. Okay, great, let's get started. Rachel, simulate us.
Earmuffs, Danny.
It's Monday.
The 2019-2020 budget simulation. So I sent this out to each of you individually. This is our online budgeting tool that gives the public kind of another visual representation of our budget, as well as the opportunity to offer some feedback to City Council by being able to adjust budgets and say, I think as a citizen, I'd like you to spend more money here, and here's where you should take it from, or here's a fee that you should raise in order to accommodate that. So for everyone, it starts out in a state of being balanced, which is based on our tentative budget that City Council adopted. And then on the left-hand side, those are the visuals. It starts out with spending and revenues down at the bottom. And then I have put together some similar categories to how we had last year. This, I believe, is the third year that we've used it. Last year, we rolled it out a little bit before the public hearing. And previous year, when we began using it, was actually after the public hearing. So we have the opportunity this year to put it out a week prior to the public hearing so that people actually have a opportunity to get in and tell us what they're thinking. Since I sent it out to you today, I did just a little bit of modification. There's some extra information that you can put in for specific categories. So for some of these, I went in and tried to put in some explanations, like for this $3.4 million for a water capital project, that's dependent on getting the $3 million grant from the Community Impact Board. So just some little vignettes to give people a little more information about what the money is actually going towards. And then, so for example, if you're a citizen and you say, hey, city's only spending $190,000 on trails, I think they should spend more like $250,000 on trails. And then up at the top here, you can see there's a deficit now of $60,800. So people would have the opportunity to come in and say, information technology, no, that doesn't have enough money. Roads and transportation, let's take it away from roads. Or they could come in and, resort community, maybe we'd like to see an increase there. So obviously not all of the feedback is going to be in line with what we can do as far as public hopefully one more way to engage and understand the budget and offer some feedback. So I'm here to get your feedback before we send it live. Mike submitted some feedback to me as well as Ronnie said she was taking a look at it, but I don't think I got an email back with suggestions. But is there anything in here that you think could be split out differently or split out into more detail or less detail? Maybe it's
So like when I'm looking at this and if I'm looking at trail development, I mean, is there, like, and I'm gonna be honest, I haven't gone through this yet. Does it explain kind of projects or, I mean, because somebody could be like, $190,000, that's a ton of money. What are we doing that? What's it going towards?
So in our detailed budget, it has more information. Here, this just has the overall capital project. So this is more like a highlights or a summary. But even in our detailed project, David, is that for one, do we have money set aside for one trail project or is it overall?
We do, yeah, and there's detail in there about it being only for next fiscal year, yes, it's only for the project that is related to the widening project, so the extension of the Fifth West path down. Or I'm sorry, not Fifth, the path from Fifth West down to the new crossing.
And that's on, I thought that UDOT was picking that.
They are
tab
doing
up.
like, we have to match a little bit. We have to match that 190,000, but they're doing the rest.
My feedback with this software is just that there are certain, like, fixed points of our budget. I mean, clearly, all budget is, every dollar is negotiable to a certain extent, but like, for example, oh gosh, what's a good example? Like staff, we can't not have staff. Like we couldn't adjust the budget to not have staff. We could also not, it's also fixed until the legislature changes our rates, what we're going to receive in terms of sales tax. So it's a little difficult to be able to respond not knowing what is fixed and what is more fluid. But it is helpful to, you know, for us and for anyone in the community to be able to say, if we'd like to do this or that, gosh, that really does have an impact. And where does the money come from? Do we take away from another department or do we try to get additional revenue? And with that question, I have been asked by several different people in several different worlds if we are, if we have maximized our tax rates. And I always say, I think so. So other than implementing a property tax, we maxed out all of the, are we at the cap of like resort community and all of the other?
We are.
We are, there are other taxes that can be implemented, like for example, a RAP tax, a Recreation, Arts, and Parks tax, but that requires a vote, correct? And
Correct.
of either the city or the county. So for our existing tax rates that are already in place, yes, but we have not maxed out all possible tax rates.
That RAP tax, would that be something that's collected at time of sale, or is that something that goes on like a property tax?
The point of sale tax.
Okay. And what is that percentage?
I don't have that right off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Well, I think it would be worth it to say, you know, with this, like, what are additional income or revenue sources? Just so that we're aware whether or not this council or any future council chooses to utilize them.
And that's an excellent point and a great conversation that we'll have also as part of our financial forecast. So Econo West has the 10-year model financial forecast that they've put together, and then also I'm meeting with Alex Buxton in a week to go over identifying other revenue streams.
And then that is going to be at our next council meeting, the financial forecast. Are we doing like a?
I don't think it's scheduled for our next council meeting.
Yeah,
I was
we're-
thinking in June after budget adoption, just so it doesn't confuse things too much with saying, okay, here's the budget and here's the 10-year forecast. It kind
Okay.
of will separate.
So then that means income is kind of fixed.
For this next year,
Which
yes.
is helpful when,
Yes.
when tooling around
Yes,
the tool.
yes.
Okay.
Unless you wanted to, you could, there would be some flexibility if you wanted to raise things like licensing fees or other fees, but that's a pretty small amount of our revenue picture overall.
Yep.
And our time constraints right now are pretty narrow for adopting the budget and doing like a fee.
Significant
overhaul.
change there, yeah.
So if we're increasing one, we're taking away from another. Okay.
Okay,
Go ahead, Mike.
so if I may, I second Emily's, I think I've already told you, the first time I looked at this last year, I kind of went, and it's complicated, and I mean, I kind of suggested that one technique would be to kind of break off big pieces like the enterprise funds. I mean, a world of people, including myself, had no idea that what the city treats as kind of discretionary spending and what's kind of operated like a business, so water. So, I mean, that'd be one place where you could break off significant pieces of this complex puzzle here,
And they
discuss those separately.
They are actually separate here. I just didn't call them enterprise funds because I felt like the
Just,
general
yeah.
public doesn't really know what an enterprise.
Maybe even, okay, that's great. Maybe more importantly, what might work well, I'm just thinking Lisa could contribute to this. Kind of have a FAQ, I guess, for your interested citizen, Joe Blow citizens, about who's just interested in learning about city finances 101. They're not going to get into gory details and so forth. You already have it. Is that what you're dialing up? I should have known.
So this, just really quick, is the information piece that I was going to have available to the public prior to the public hearing, then also at the public hearing. Originally, it was going to be a top 10 things to know about the budget, but I couldn't really narrow it down to 10 things. So it's 2 pages, front and back. But it's kind of similar to the structure on the simulation, which is basically, I think what citizens want to know is where does the money come from and where do you spend it? And probably how much is left over, which is 0. But this just breaks down, sorry, I can't decide where to drive here. Where it comes from, you'll notice that property tax is in there as a 0, both places, because I think a lot of people in the community have a misperception that the city actually levies a property tax, because if you live in city limits, you pay a property tax. And then.
And that we are, maybe it would be worth it to put a sentence that, that states further that we are one of the only cities in the state of Utah that does not collect a property tax. Because they might be like, well, why even mention that?
Okay.
But it's an important conversation for us to have, so. Do you all agree? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. This is just the kind of thing. So when you write this thing, I think you made a great starting it. Try to write it from the resident's point of view rather than your own. Because think about where you would be if you were one of them and wanting to know, like, the city, I don't trust them. They're wasting my money, blah, 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 blah. And try to explain to them, and try to instill some trust in it by explaining.
Right.
So that
And
would help.
I've passed it around to about 5 or 6 different people from different backgrounds, just to kind of say, what do you get out of this? Or what questions does this bring up? Or to try and fill in other perspectives besides mine, because I know I look at it all the time, and I look at it from an accounting viewpoint, so I want to make it understandable for the community. One of the things I did call out based on some suggestions is that citizens generally want to know how much we're paying in personnel costs. So I split that out separately in addition to what's included in the departments. Based on the outcome of your meeting today, I just wanted to draw your attention to this line. So depending on where you guys end on that, it doesn't have an amount.
That's good.
And then everything kind of pulls people back into, here's the public hearing, it's on May 14th, and a link to the overall budget document. I think for years it's been unrealistic that we expect the public to take a 60-page budget, digest it, come back and give us feedback, because.
Are you guys going to try to
This is
publish
good,
this in
thank you.
I'm sorry. Publish this in the newspapers or just put it on the city's website or what?
I was going to put it on the website, distribute through social media, have it available at our public hearing, any other venues that you guys think would be helpful. I wasn't planning on doing like a display ad, but.
That sounds great. That
Thank
sounds
you.
great.
Rachel, do you have stats on how many people played with this last year?
We put it out close enough to the public hearing that we didn't get a whole lot, but I can actually. Somewhere in here, sorry. I want to say it was around 60. It included city employees. So this was last year, 642. Oh, no, 19. But we didn't advertise it, we didn't put it on social media, and we didn't roll it out last year. So unless you had the link, you didn't really know it existed.
Gotcha.
This is great, and it is 12:28, and so I hope that we get public participation and comments, and then we've got our public hearing, so I'm glad that that document also has the public hearing information at the bottom of it.
So is council good with me rolling it out after today, getting it out there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, next up, public safety. Hi, Chief.
Hello.
How are you doing today, Chief?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good, thank you for coming.
You bet.
Are you used to the appellation chief yet?
I am not. I still continue to sign on the radio or sign off with 2T2 instead of 2T1, and dispatch is kind enough to correct me. I'll get it eventually. Every time your number changes, there's a transitional period where you forget it. But
Also, isn't there an extra star, or should there be?
there is, and I'm going to take a Sharpie and just mark out the assistant.
gosh.
It's just- it takes about 8 weeks to get a new badge. So they're on order. They'll get here eventually, and I'm waiting for Skaggs, the uniform supply place, to get some new stars to me.
So there's a Sharpie in the interim.
I'll get a silver Sharpie for that and a black one for the badge. We'll get there. We'll get there. So the budget for this year is very similar to last year. I really don't have any significant changes in the police budget. The only somewhat significant changes that we have are in animal control, and it's related to training and travel, which goes along with training for out-of-town travel. And the reason for those two budget increases are for increased training for our code enforcement officers and to get them additionally certified through some of the animal control organizations in Utah who certify them as animal control officers. So it wasn't a significant bump. Looking at the travel went from 1,770 to 4,900. And then training, we're asking for 7,700 instead of the previous year's 3,200. We have the two code enforcement officers who are now responsible for a lot more than animal control, which is historically where their duties have laid, was in doing just animal control. They're doing a lot of parking, illegal camping enforcement, and several other things that they had not historically done. So they need additional training to take on those tasks and do them safely and within policy and procedure.
I know that one thing, thank you for explaining that, and I know that one thing that this council wanted to talk further with during the budget session was the housing stipend that was negotiated by former Chief Winder.
Correct.
So we did want to have that conversation.
Okay.
So let's see where it's reflected in the budget.
That would be part of this line right here in the employee benefits number. And we really couched it as a recruitment and retention program that, you know, again, the officer could basically use for whatever he or she wanted. It didn't have to be for housing per se, but it was more in looking at the global issue of attracting officers to work here and then retaining them here because of the issues that are happening at a national level and also within the state, because we do compete for the officers in other parts of the state, not just sort of locally, I guess, was the rationale for that. So that's my kickoff.
Yeah, that is correct. Are there specific questions regarding the recruitment retention policy or funds that we can answer?
Well, I'm curious, so how, is it for every employee who is in the police department? How much is that an employee? Like, does it break down individually?
Yeah, what's the money part of that?
It's for sworn employees only, so police only. It's not for code enforcement or any of the other civilian employees. And it's $1,500 recruitment check, and then they get $250 per month on top of their regular salary. And if I understand it correctly, there's also a $1,500 retention check at 6 months.
Just one time? They
One
get
time.
that 250 bucks?
Right, the $250 per month continuing, and then $1,500 signing and $1,500 retention at 6 months
And that 250 is for every officer?
for every sworn employee, correct? So every officer.
So Brett, I'm just curious, because
Sorry, I got that. That was my bad. That won't happen again.
so Mr. Winder went in and, sold that program to us last year. And we were reluctant because it's, kind of special favoritism, as it will, to the police department as opposed to the other city employees, and we were reluctant to get into it. And he basically sold it to us on the grounds that this is the only way he could effectively recruit officers to come and fill his ranks. So you guys are, so tell me where's our money gone? Has it been useful? And can you defend it again for that reason? I mean, I kind of hate to do what's an obvious disparity to the other departments unless something demonstrably productive is coming out of it.
It's a good question, and we've had this program now for about 6 months, and I don't feel like that's really a sufficient period of time to determine whether or not it has been successful. In that time, we've lost 3 officers, 1 to retirement, 1 was terminated, and then 1 left to go back north for family reasons. So from the outside looking in, I can see how it would appear that maybe it isn't working, but those 3 exits were not related to anything that I think would be impactful to the recruitment and retention. Having only 6 months, approximately 6 months, it's 6 or 7 months into the program, I don't know that it's sufficient to say, yes, it's working, or no, it isn't, quite frankly. I am in discussions with a San Juan deputy right now and to come to Moab. He's an inexperienced deputy. He's a very well-respected law enforcement officer, and one of his first questions was about the recruitment and retention. Do we still offer it, and how much is it? He's used to getting, I believe they get $400 a month for housing allowance for the deputies who work the northern region. And San Juan's been doing that for a couple of years now. So in order to compete with that type of program and attract that type of officer who has experience, I do think it's a valid program.
And it looks like in calculating the 250, I used 17 sworn officers.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So 17 officers at 250 a month for 12 months is $51,000. And assuming there's somebody's hired and somebody's leaving, so that's the monetary amount for that retention piece. And then the bonus amount varies depending on who we hire and who we don't, so.
Right now, we're down 4 officers. We have 1 starting on Monday, a week from today, and he's a 20-plus year veteran of law enforcement, so that'll be helpful. And then that'll leave us down 3. And we don't currently have the ability to send anyone to the academy because of the way the academy now requires agencies to reserve slots for cadets. So we're limited really in hiring either lateral from another agency who already has experience, or someone who has self-sponsored themselves through one of the satellite academies, for instance, the one that we have locally through Blanding, and has that certification but doesn't have any prior law enforcement. So we can't hire people off the street and send them to the academy, which limits us even further in who we can recruit.
So David, what is the amount that you put in the budget? Because the salaries line is quite big, or not the salaries, I'm sorry,
Employee benefits.
the benefits line is quite big. And I'm getting like 60,000 here,
Yeah, I had like, I think I put in about 55,000.
55,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so let me conclude, if I may, by somebody else. Conditionally, I'm okay with it for a while, at least until you can demonstrate that it is or is not effective, and maybe in another year. I mean, alternatively, I mean, I guess I would ask the question once again, if you were just do away with the special housing stipend and instead simply increase the base salary that you're offering to your sworn officers instead. I mean, it seems like it's all money in my pocket one way or the other. And it would be a little easier to account for in my mind and justify to the rest of the city.
I agree, and as it was explained to me by Jim Winder, this was sort of a temporary stopgap until a salary survey could be done to determine where our salaries currently sit in comparison to other cities like Park City and Vail and Aspen, cities with a high cost of living and a similar type of demographic. I don't know where we stand on that salary survey.
Okay, well, I'd like to encourage city staff to make that happen. I suppose it costs money to do the salary survey as well.
That's in my budget, I need it there.
Okay, the salary survey,
Okay.
cost is survey, the salaries.
Yes, the cost of the salary survey, yes.
All right, so we'll talk about all this later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for outlining that. Any other questions about public safety? All right, Chief, thank you so much. See you later. Okay, next up, admin. David?
Okay. So we use admin in a couple of different ways when we talk about the budget. One is the overall sort of general fund administration, which would include, or central administration related type activities, which includes like HR, planning, recorder, engineering, basically everything outside of public safety and public works that is in the general fund. The other way we talk about it is more specifically with regard to kind of this central administration budget, which is city manager, assistant city manager, executive admin assistant, some related contracting funds. That also, and then there's also the budget that's specific to the council or the executive section of the budget, which is included in there as well. And then the community contributions pieces now has been part of the administration budget as well. And with the recent shift around, breaking out human resources is considered part of that as well. So a lot of the way we talk about the admin budget is about different pieces that have moved around over the years, but we're always refining how we do budgeting, and a lot of that is reflected in how it's organized in the administration world. So, and then also worth remembering, of course, that the Film Commission budget is technically part of the administration budget as well. So as you all know, and as is legal services, as you all know, the sort of administration function does a lot of the back-end bureaucratic work that needs to be done, and I use that term positively. It takes a bureaucracy to run an organization, and we have one. It includes things like paying for and managing insurance, benefits for employees, a lot of day-to-day work around constituent services, dealing with accounts payable and accounts receivable, as you all are familiar with. There's just a myriad of sort of catch-all things that, from an administrative perspective, have to be done and get included in this budget. So I don't know what your preference is. I can run through them sort of area by area. Do you want me to do that? Just talk about them briefly?
Sure. What do you?
Highlight big changes. I could do that.
Let's just do chunk by chunk.
Okay, so this first section is called general admin, and we've really tried to consolidate to the degree possible this into the other admin sections just for simplicity's sake, but there's still a couple of remnants like utilities and telephones for the building, for the city center area come out of this budget, as does our general insurance premium, as it were.
Okay.
Moving on, attorney contains funds for the city attorney. It contains funds for public defender and the prosecution services that we contract out for, as well as for when we need to bring in specialized legal services like for employment issues or grandma issues. This also includes funds set aside for our water attorney that we have on contract, and as well as funds set aside for future lobbying services.
And that's under 42231, all those
That's
three different
400
people?
or 40,000?
Or the 200?
Correct.
So it's 40,000 more than last year
Correct.
because of those efforts?
Yeah, just trying to ballpark it. I mean, because we pay everybody at an hourly rate, or for actual hours worked, it's hard to know exactly where we'll land, but I tried to ballpark it based on what the expectations have been.
Okay.
So, idiot question to you and Rachel. Every time the city writes a check to anybody, whether it's an attorney or pay a water bill, whatever, we are the water bill. Do you always write an account number like 42231.2?
Yes.
Really? Mm-hmm. Maybe if I were to take over and do what you guys have been doing for too long, I would know that.
Oh, you might be up next.
Could be.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So that's legal-related services plus lobbyists. And the council and mayor section here is sort of traditionally called the executive section. This does include a placeholder here for discussion around salary increases for elected officials. Do you want to get into that now, or do you want me to keep moving through?
Well, I think, I just want to point out that while it's a salary increase, the intention is to just increase to what it would cost for the city, if the city were going to be providing healthcare to council members, that is the amount, it's in that increase amount, correct?
Correct. So that comes out to about 51,000 annualized, as opposed to, what we had originally talked about in terms of a salary increase. So,
Can you explain that? I'm confused.
Yeah, can you explain that?
So, well, it's really just a placeholder as much as anything, but the idea was that what is the dollar amount that it would cost to put all 6 of you on the city's insurance plan, or all 6 of the electeds on the city's insurance plan. This is the dollar amount. The 151,000 is the annual amount that would cost, and half of that is the 75,578. Presuming that there'd be an implementation halfway through the year. Now, what that leaves open is a question: do you want to do benefits? Do you want to do cash equivalent? Do you want to do a different amount for an increase in salary? I really couldn't get any consensus on where to go here, so.
Well, we were told because this council is not a full-time position that receiving benefits wasn't possible, like for us to sign up for city health insurance wasn't possible.
I think that used to be the case, but that changed when we changed insurance providers a few years ago, right?
We have to modify our plan. Right, we have the option, we can go, we can modify our plan to have elected officials, basically group, that we can add in there that states that you don't work full-time but are still eligible, but you have to be an elected official. We just have to be really careful on that wording to make sure that the elected official part is in there, because if we start giving out health insurance to someone who's not full-time, then anybody can come back and, they don't have to be full-time and they want benefits, so we just have to modify that plan to actually list out elected officials.
And that would be like, if somebody's like a summer lifeguard, they would be like a part-timer. If somebody, and so what we're saying is we don't want to open up to somebody that's just like a coach that's just coaching and.
But we do have permanent part-time, so we have people that write do not qualify for benefits.
And a lot of those are like our lifeguards that work year-round but don't work full-time.
So it was like, I think among conversations that I've had, there was this idea of, well, we could open up to health insurance, but then also some council members might have health insurance through another area, and would it be easier to just look at a salary increase to reflect what would be giving the council insurance benefits?
Right.
But then I was curious, like, is the number based on, the current salary
No, the number's based on,
or the average employee amount, or what is?
it's based on what it would cost to cover everybody under a family plan. So whether your salary is 50,000 or 80,000 or 20,000, that wouldn't matter. That wouldn't affect that calculation.
So conversely, if suppose in worst case, we elected not to diddle with council members, excuse me, salaries at all, we could still elect to do the benefits package as you've described it here because it's not dependent on salary.
If we were directed by the mayor and council to make that modification to the plan to include elected officials, we could do.
Understand that, but I mean, one of the options in front of us that we're still debating is whether and if so, how much to increase our salaries. But even if we didn't touch our salaries and leave them at the current levels, we could still elect to purchase the insurance.
Correct.
Okay. So Mayor, may I suggest, we haven't, there's been a lot of discussion amongst us all about druthers about how to proceed. Did you want to have that discussion now or have it later on, perhaps more with a public input, or what would you like to do?
That's a good point. So budget could stay as is, and we can see what we see at public hearing about this particular line item. I think people are going to say, like, what is the exact dollar amount? So it might be worth it to calculate what that exact dollar amount would be if we're looking at a salary increase versus
Yeah, and Rachel, you were kind enough to send us those numbers at one point. Now I've lost them.
per
They got
position.
buried. Could you send them again, pretty please?
Yeah, and those were the survey numbers from other communities.
Okay.
Which numbers, I'm sorry?
You had listed our current salaries and what you had budgeted for. I think it's these numbers up here. And you had proposed, the old salaries, the new salaries, and then the cost of health benefits and so forth. So you sent those costs in an EM. In other words, it made it easier for a resident, for example, to say, oh, they're giving themselves a 120% raise or whatever the number might be.
Well, and I think it's very important for us to recognize as a body that our neighboring council did do an increase. And so if in the future, as elections come along, if there's going to be, competitive, just like when we're talking about police officers, that if you want to recruit and compete with the other municipality, we really need to have a serious look at this number. And it was, and so I'm grateful to have this in the budget and this be part of our budget conversation. It might be worth it also to have what that number looks like. So if we were to match what the county did in terms of salary increase, what that difference would look like as well.
I believe that's the 191 number. Is that correct?
That's correct. The 191 was matching what the county is doing.
And the 151 is matching what's
The health insurance.
the health insurance.
So by the end of June, are we also going to have before us new salaries and wages up for council approval?
Yes, and they'll be sent to public hearing, so you'll see that on your next agenda with a request to send it to public hearing. Public hearing being the first meeting.
Okay, so I think this came up last time around. It's a little problematic approving the budget before we do that, because if we approve the budget and then adopt different wages than what's proposed,
Oh.
then that immediately throws the budget out of balance.
And I did make this suggestion, well, it's a two-part suggestion. One, that the increases wouldn't start until January 1st, 2020.
Right, and
So
that's
that would,
reflected.
No, but this is about citywide. I'm not just talking about council. I'm talking about the approving the budget and then approving wages that have already been kind of approved by default in,
So can I
The new
speak to
budget.
that?
yes.
please.
So the COLA is put in as a suggested COLA of up to 2%. So the pay rate schedule that will go to public hearing that you will then adopt reflects that 2% COLA. It does not mean that 2% is already guaranteed in the budget. So if council elects to change that percentage, the overall budget does not mean that we'll expend that 2%, it just means it's included in there. So we wouldn't necessarily go back and adjust wages down, if that makes sense.
Got it.
We are establishing a ceiling with this budget.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
And I also wanted to say too that, so when employees are getting a COLA, that should reflect with council members as well. The council salary should have the same
Right.
COLA application. Is that correct? Is that in the budget?
And that happened last year.
Okay. Okay. Any other,
Even though it should happen, it often doesn't, I believe.
it hasn't been historically, that's why I asked.
Last year was the first year that council requested it.
Yeah. So I think that it shouldn't be a request, it should be that, you know, you're an employee of the city and that COLA be applied to employees. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
And you adopt it each year by ordinance, so you always have that discretion.
Yeah.
Previous councils didn't choose to do that, so.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, Mayor, if I may offer, I know my own opinions about this whole subject have evolved somewhat, talking to lots of people, and I'm sure the rest of you, same sort of thing. In other words, would you like for me, for example, or the rest of us to share with you privately where our opinions are about this whole subject with you, so you'll have some idea where we all stand?
Well, I think let's, like we said, we'll have our public hearing, we'll get more feedback about this and other items, and then when we go to do final budget, we'll have that deliberation, but like this or any other item, we should, you know, be thinking and chatting and stewing and processing and ready with a position is what I'd say back about that. Just find a position and stick to it.
I'm comfortable budgeting for it and then having the discussion in the context of the city salaries.
Yeah. And so are we comfortable then with that number as is in the budget? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I
Thanks.
agree. I do think you got to leave the placeholder in there, with the numbers right where they are, so that'd be great.
Okay. And then the rest of the line items under this, what did I call them? Clumps? Chunks?
Yeah.
Budget chunks?
Just subcategories, sure. Bumped up the travel budget a little bit just based on actuals for last year here, to 13,000 from what was budgeted at 11,000 for last year. And other than that, just made some minor modifications based on actual or projected actuals, I guess is the best way to think about it. Moving on into the sort of admin. This is the city manager, assistant city manager, executive admin assistant, sustainability and communications. The way I've structured this budget, it actually proposes moving the housing specialist over to the planning department to be a part of that budget instead of in the central admin budget.
And then that position would be supervised by the planning director?
Correct.
Fantastic.
And then really just didn't make any other major changes other than that. Let's see, definitely modified the expenses and supplies based on actuals up there, and brought down the professional technical services budget because some of that got moved to other departments, but also just based again on projected actuals and how much is available. And that's really for contracting out for things like studies or analysis work that needs to be done, some of which we know, some of which is a known unknown. So I really just, it's good to have funds in there so that whenever you all think we need to drop in and do a quick study on something, we have funds available to do it.
Okay.
That's been helpful.
And what did we spend? Where are we fiscal year to date on professional services?
Professional services, hold on, let me look.
You don't have to pull it up right now. You know
Okay.
what, let's just,
It's definitely under what this budgeted amount was, but I don't remember. Is that right?
75,000
Great.
of the
Of the 190, yeah.
Okay.
And then this item was, this line item was established per request to basically have funds available for sustainability-related projects and initiatives. A lot of not big ticket items, but items that help advance our sustainability goals. You see some examples there. Slim Jims are not the food, but are I believe a recycling, no.
Not something you want to snap into.
Right. Yes, exactly. So just things like that give Rosemary some flexibility to spend when she needs to deal with to support her initiatives.
So Rosemary, then I was sort of stunned to learn, I think, that when you first hired on, it's like, hi, welcome to the city. By the way, you don't have any money to spend.
Well, that's not
Nothing
accurate.
budgeted.
That's not accurate.
But that's not true?
Definitely
But now
not
you have
accurate.
more, is that right? So
Generally, anything Rosemary has requested, we've tried to accommodate through our regular budget. So it's not like she's over there
okay.
just,
No, I'm not.
just to be clear.
Okay.
So moving on, Film Commission is what it is. I tried to really keep it tight here. There's some travel that happens with the Film Commission. That's just part of the deal. There is a new program here that is a one-time deal that BIGA's been putting together. It's called the Showdown Event, and it is a competition that they're structuring. It's a short film competition to happen this fall. We've budgeted for her to actually raise funds to help support that event, and then we budgeted to spend those funds. So that's why that line item is a little bit bigger than it normally is. But we have a place to show revenue coming in from a gala event that she's planning to actually raise funds to support the actual Showdown event.
David, in terms of the Film Commission, and I'm curious, the county contributes money towards this fund, right?
Half the budget.
Half of it, and then, but looking at the mandates for the TRT, Film Commission is like an expenditure that can completely be used. I mean, is that something that, it seems like it could be funded in whole by TRT, is that not correct?
By the county's TRT? Yeah, it could be. Traditionally, the city and the county have split paying for that, so that's just why it is the way it is right now.
I'd like to move towards that because, I mean, this has been a discussion in this community about maximizing spending, whatever is coming out of the general funds for promotional activities, that should be paid for by the restricted TRT so that those general funds are available for services which benefit the citizens directly or other community priorities. So I'd really like to move in that direction. And this year I realize it's going to take some negotiation with the county probably, but my impression is that they're supportive of that general spending pattern.
Right, so, and I don't know if it's what we need to say to make that step happen, but that would be great. And I know they don't have the space to potentially house a Film Commission, and so if we still do that at the Mark, and that's, our portion or something, but yeah, to be able to use that money towards something else would be, I support that as well.
Perhaps we should have a committee of two to talk to the county, or direct staff to, or something, because I think there's going to be some discussion.
Yeah, it's a long time coming for the county clerk, and now we have a new position, finance director, that there could be good conversation especially if there is an increase in the amount of money that we have as a valley to receive TRT. But that was a good, I'm glad that you pointed that out. And so then we show that we expend half of that. So
Right,
it's
so
in
we
our budget for full, but then we receive half of that from the county.
As a revenue.
Okay.
That's right.
And will they, like that special project, will they be putting money towards that too?
That is a good question. I've been trying to think through how to do that because it doesn't seem really fair actually to assess that because we also will show revenue coming in to offset this additional expense. So we'll probably do some sort of calculation that reflects taking that out as part of the calculation for the half since we are showing additional revenue in for it.
So really that event is only gonna cost us $8,000? Because she's gonna make about 20?
That, that's the goal. Yeah,
Okay.
that is the goal.
I know that she is in conversation and has done such a great job networking, and that this is it's gonna be a good one. Showdown.
Showdown.
All right, next.
Okay, community contributions is the next section. This reflects the changes that were made over the last year or two with regard to how we organize these. It takes out the very specific line items for things like communities that care or shelter services or local first, lumps them all into this community contributions combined item with a couple still broken out, and then moves us on from there.
I just realized, so do we have budgeted for the student of the month?
Well, we haven't traditionally budgeted for the student of the month.
I saw a line
There it
for
is,
that.
yeah, we're good. Yeah, sorry, I just saw, I thought so too, but then I didn't see it, but then I saw it, sorry. We're good.
Okay.
And then, so, David
Yeah.
and Rachel, I'm just curious, at what point do we start eliminating line items if they are non-existent and they haven't been?
What is it, like 3 years?
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I mean, I can go in and hide them on here to make it easier to read, which I've done on a few others,
Okay.
but it was
I was curious just how that works, because,
Our adopted budget will hide any account that has a zero budget.
gotcha. Okay,
and I made a note here for the extra 7,000 for the 4th of July, so we'll make that change presumably after, when we go to final.
okay.
Great. Now we're at HR.
Yes, we are. Danielle, would you like to speak to this? Yeah, since you're here. So this obviously is
Pretty simple, there's not much to speak to.
This is a change. We broke out HR out of the recorder's office this year, and it's now part of the admin world, which is, I think, sends a nice signal that, you know, that's an important part of our, I mean, we're all important. Everybody is above average in the city. But having, giving Danny a different title and breaking her out as a department here, or as a part of a department, I think sends a nice signal.
Okay, we previously were encompassed in the recorder's department, so this basically just took 2 employees out of that department, moved it over into this one. There was a couple one-time costs in here, including some training and a new hire setup that would be some furniture purchased. Training and travel, I'd like to send Stephanie to get her HR certificates, and that's done through the University of Utah. So there's a little bit of cost in that. Other than that, it's pretty simple.
So Danny, there's just 2 of you total, is that what you just said? Yeah, Lisa.
All right, and that really is,
No questions from me?
that's all there is.
Pretty easy.
Pretty
Yeah,
simple.
pretty
Yeah.
easy.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
that takes us to the total central
Um,
admin, and that's
Where
that.
would the benefit of Family Medical Leave Act go?
It's not a benefit per se.
But where would
It's-
it go?
Well, it's not an expense, it's part of just regular, well, I mean, Family and Medical Leave Act basically means that when somebody's out for family medical leave, they can't be fired.
Correct, they're
So-
guaranteed the 12 weeks without pay. So if they don't have enough leave time to do that, we still hold their position for that period of time. I mean, there's some criteria they have to meet, how long they worked or how many hours they work, but that. So really, there's no additional cost to the city if someone is on FMLA, because we don't do paid FMLA.
We don't do paid FMLA, okay. If we were to, where would that be reflected?
So if we were gonna do paid FMLA, that would fall under,
Well, it would really just be absorbed within the budget because say that I was out for 9 weeks on paternity leave, you would still just pay my salary normally as you would, as opposed to me taking unpaid time off.
So in theory, the budget would
Oh,
already
right.
encompass that.
Okay, so I just want to plant a seed because I've been thinking a lot about this. And it's actually not Family Medical Leave Act, but I've been thinking a lot about what can accelerate women to continue to participate and compete in the workforce in general. And one thing that I was so lucky to benefit from was an employer that allowed me to bring my child to work with me. And so I actually didn't take any leave. I was gone for a week, healing and resting. But a week after the birth, I was back to work, and I had a very flexible schedule, but I was actually able to bring my child to work with me. I know that it's an incredibly...
It's for you.
It's Chad calling. No. I don't know what to do with that. Thanks, Carmela. But the idea that now you bring your child to work, you're also needing to work. So the idea of having an in-house nursery for children that are 0 to up to preschool, 0 to 2, if not 0 to 4. So we just want to plant the idea, not proposing to add it to our budget this year, but the idea that employees could bring their children to work and we could have an in-house daycare. We could provide that daycare by essentially having a space and an employee that would provide that care, and then your child is here with you. For breastfeeding mothers, that's huge, and for overall performance and morale, it's pretty cool. And it also creates a cohort of kids among staff, which is unique. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Could we put the nursery at the new Public Works office? I'm just kidding.
And I know we've been talking about renovations for City Hall too. So I'm just planting, actually I'm not even planting a seed, I'm just creating soil with that statement. No seed, but soil to consider. Thanks, Danny.
So if I may,
I just heard Rachel mention the lactation room, that we do have a lactation room in the HR office.
so this might be more just browsing a seed catalog, but
Yeah.
a number of functions and positions are broken out in the admin, but sustainability is still just sort of lumped under other admin. And I'm wondering if, maybe it's not this year, but maybe next year it becomes its own cluster of line items,
Like it's a
of
department.
accounts, yeah. I think, I don't know if these are quite departments, but if we're just acknowledging its importance to the mission of the city.
They feel like departments, are they not set up that way?
I mean, technically, admin is a department, and then I would tend to call it like human resources is a division within admin, or community contributions is a division within the department. Just to be clear, because sometimes we use department within a department, and that seems kind of like confusing terminology.
Yeah, the film commission.
What's that?
The film commission.
Yeah, film commission. Or even, we talk about the public works department. We talk about the public works department, and then we sometimes talk about the, sewer department. But the sewer is technically part of public works, so is it like a department upon a department? My brain starts to leak out of my ears.
It's a division within
It's a division, really, even though we still colloquially refer to them as departments. It's just a terminology issue more than anything. But I hear what you're saying, figure out a way to separate out the sustainability piece of this so that it's actually clear how much is spent on sustainability specifically in that sort of administrative capacity. Yeah, we could do that.
Right.
With that, is it too ambitious to look at doing that for this?
I mean, we could look at it. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of an organizational chart thing too.
Well, yes, sort of. I mean,
I mean, could it be a division under planning?
Well, then that's a whole other deal. It would, I mean, you'd probably want to
I
keep it
don't
as a
know where it would fit,
central,
yeah.
still within the kind of central administration function, right? So that it's not specific to planning.
And seed planting might manifest in an amended budget in 2020
Right.
calendar year.
Right, like in the December, January
Yeah,
reflection,
If it ta-
quieter month.
if it takes time to figure out like how that would best be located here and the account numbers created and so forth. And
Yeah. Okay,
You know?
okay. So that's that for admin, correct? And so we've got, we're at 113 right now. And we wanted to talk capital projects.
Did we want to talk recorder? Was that part of today?
Planning.
Recorder and
Oh.
planning, yeah.
You're right. I don't know why, oh, because that was under administrative. Yeah, planning, sorry, and recorder. I'm sorry, I just forgot both of you. How horrible. I
I'm
apologize.
actually going to point to David for most of it, mainly because I was in the mix, not up here, I was down here.
How
Right,
many positions are reflected in recorder?
3, I believe,
right, correct.
2.5.
Oh, okay, right.
Paying bills.
Yeah,
He was a full person.
yeah. So, right, so, yes, so this year, as you all know, we've been in flux and transition with what's happening in the recorder's office and also with what has been happening in planning, and so the budgets, we've tried to keep them as calm, I guess, as possible, considering all of the transition in the work, so they're pretty straightforward, pretty flat, no giant changes, really, as we look at recorder in particular. Let's see, what would I highlight for you? We did up the public notice amount and centralize that in the recorder's office so that it's just a little clearer that that's where the source of funding is for public notices, for even land use items.
Do we have grandma under control and properly budgeted?
I would say yes in that it takes human time that is reflected in salaries, and then when we outsource some of the legal work through, through Austin, typically,
Is that
Austin
the
Writer.
professional?
No, that's reflected in the attorney section in the central admin budget.
Oh, okay.
But just transition-wise, Summer is in training and she's working on receiving her certified records officer designation. And until that happens, I'm still functioning as the records officer. Because you don't want to have a gap in grammar.
So you're still the grandma?
Until I take over the
Until
title.
Summer's the grandma? It's horrible. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Anything from the council regarding recorder?
Well, what are the professional tech services typically? Oh, the software?
Codification of the ordinance that city council passes has to be codified into our code.
Codification, just for people.
Codification of all of the city ordinances into the municipal code, the accounting software, as well as some other software that the recorder's office uses, Smartsheets, DocuSign, Adobe, any of the subscription-based services that the recorder uses.
And we use Munich, which source software? For the code publishing. What's our code publishing?
Codepublishing.com. Yeah.
Code publishing.
Muni code, so I don't want to say the wrong one, because then they'll call me and say.
Right.
Right. But we switched about 10 years ago over to
Okay.
code publishing.
Thank you. Okay, anything else, recorder?
Oh, thanks, David.
Nora, you're up.
All right.
I was just going to say you're on your own.
Never
What do you
even
want?
seen it, so there you go.
So this was another one we did, obviously, prior to Nora coming on. I worked with Summer to figure out what made the most sense, just to try to keep things stable. And Also said to Nora, you know, if you see things you want to make major changes with in the next few months.
Can we go
sorry,
to
I'll
planning?
Keep going up there, yep. Then, you know, we do budget amendments usually once a year, and we can be responsive to those needs moving forward. So planning is broken out into two sections. One is sort of planning, generally, planning and development, and the other one we're calling, it says inspections here, but probably a better name would be building services, right? And so that's the building official and related costs associated with that function, that part of the planning and development world.
I'm sorry, David, so who's on there?
Can we go down to inspections and then go back up?
Sure.
Okay, and Barry is here.
This includes the building official position.
Barry,
and
come
that's
on
it.
up,
Just for this,
And-
gotcha.
Yeah.
Nora, stay. And so then, building inspector is under planning director, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that inspections is just Barry and Barry's business?
That's right,
Correct?
the business of Barry.
Okay. Hi, Barry.
Precisely. They, you know, the staff had requested the addition of a permit tech or a permit specialist position in here, but given where we're at budget-wise and my, you know, all of the concerns that we all have around the sort of uncertainty of both revenues and the state change.
And the fact that we hired we already have somebody there, that's Kaylee, correct?
No, that's not exactly correct. So just between that and the state budget uncertainties and the fact that Nora was starting and the fact that we have essentially 2 vacancies right now in the planning department, I didn't feel like it was the time to add a position. So what we have is the ability for Nora to go in and reassess who needs to be doing what and figure out the best way to allocate the resources that are currently in the budget, staffing-wise and money-wise. But Kyla's job is as the admin assistant for engineering and for planning, and that's a little bit, that's definitely quite different from being a permit tech per se. And, you know, she does some things that might be permit techy in terms of answering questions and helping to enter in some information, but it's a different position ultimately.
So then what is that position? Because I thought that position was created to do that. So what is that position?
Sorry, which position? The Kyla's position? That's the administrative assistant for engineering and planning.
Yeah, I understand the title, but what is in the job description?
I could pull it up, but it's a lot of working with initial phone calls, scheduling meetings, pretty typical admin assistant work for those two different departments.
I know she does lots of budget work for Chuck, POs and finances for him. She helps me out. The permit tech stuff is sort of split between about 3 of us right now.
Who?
Mona's doing some, I'm trying to do what I can, and Kyla's helping out as well. It's kind of scattered, but that's why we'd like somebody who can do just that, at least in the future anyway, so we can keep track of the projects as they're coming through.
Because having 3 people doing permit tech could be very confusing to the development community.
Very much so, and it's confusing for us of, well, where's the paper? Who's got it this time? It's something that Nora and I have not had a chance to discuss yet. But we will.
But we also do have the 2 open positions and a chance to evaluate those in the context of, well.
So where's code compliance? Because you said Mona's doing permit tech, but really her position doesn't have that in the job description, and she's the code compliance specialist, correct?
That's right, and she's part of this line item here.
So she's under general planning.
Correct.
Can you go back up? So in that planning, we've got, so in the fiscal year 20 tentative budget, that would be Nora,
So that's
planning director.
planning director, the vacant assistant position, the vacant development services
So
position.
planner, assistant planner, community services
For development,
Coordinator slash director or
development services coordinator is what it's called.
development services.
And then Nora's, and then code compliance.
Code compliance.
And then where
And,
does it-
and Kayla.
I think Kyla's
I'm
position
sorry.
is technically all in engineering, right?
That was split, but I don't know.
Budget-wise, okay.
and then where would that housing specialist?
That would also go here under salaries and wages.
That's on 41,810?
Mm-hmm.
And that's reflected as of like July 1st?
Correct.
And for the duration of the year?
Yes. Not the duration of this year, but starting with the new fiscal year budget.
For the duration of the fiscal year budget.
So the development services coordinator might have plan checking skills, and so they might coordinate as well as do some of that actual work and be a
Possible. And the way the job description is framed right now, it's pretty broad. So it kind of depends on what kinds of applicants we get.
So David and Nora, do you guys have your 2 vacant positions? Do you have recs out for those people, or are you still waiting to find out exactly whom you want before you advertise?
Well, there was an advertisement for the assistant planner position when my position was advertised. And I have just received those resumes. So we'll decide whether we want to re-advertise for that one. Development Services Coordinator has not been advertised, but we will, I want to get that done ASAP.
And then what do you see that job description looking like?
What is the job description looking like? We can send you a copy if you want to take a look at it. We send it to all the council members. It basically says that this person is kind of responsible for making sure everything moves through the process well, including, coordinating with DOT and building department and everything. So it's a little bit more than just a zoning administrator because they're required to coordinate with other departments.
And would that be, and that is separate, in your opinion, from permit technician?
Yeah,
So permit tech would not be part of that position?
that's correct. It could, it potentially could be depending on who we get.
Because we did have somebody in that position that wore a whole lot of hats and did all of that work independently. And,
Permit tech,
Not the permit tech part, though.
not the permit tech part.
because that was handled by the county. But still, still reviewing, still looking at stuff, so. Okay.
So, one more question.
Really, when we said we were going to take on the building inspector, we should have been more specific in saying that we thought we were going to take on 2 positions, not 1, because what I thought was that permit tech was going to be part of, like, the department, but not like the building inspector and a tech. Like,
Well, and I
it
think
was going to
that's-
be 1 position,
I think
and
that's-
these are 2.
I think that's still possible, actually, considering where we're at. Because again, remember, we do have this assistant planner position as well that's worth entering into that mix and thinking about what that person's role could be. So. But at the same time, yeah, we get into these things and we have to adjust based on what we see coming down the pipe.
So I got a question for you guys, newfangled tools. So for example, if you order something from Amazon these days, shippers, you'll occasionally get email messages saying your order has been shipped, your order is now in San Francisco, your order is next door, blah, 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 which is kind of nice from the user's point of view. So in complicated processes, like an applicant comes in with an application for a new property or whatever permits they need to file with planning and zoning, and that process typically goes on for, I don't know, a month or 2, or you guys can tell me. Do you guys maybe you do this already, routinely notify those folks it would be the function of somebody who is tracking the process, and they would say, oh, Mr. Jones permit just passed internal review from the design and review development team, for example. And he would get an email from that saying, hey, it's passed, things are looking good, or something.
Yeah, that would be part of the development service coordinator's job. And the process is already kind of set up for those updates. Because what we require is somebody submits an application, we review it internally, we get back to them with comments, then they submit, whenever they're ready, a resubmittal. So there's kind of ongoing communication, assuming that the applicant is moving forward in a timely manner.
But we could benefit from money in this budget for software that could
Yeah.
not only be a pipeline, a legit pipeline, but then also that is like forward-facing to applicants.
We could look at that. I know that building department and code enforcement use iWorks. And I don't know exactly what that entails or if it has a component like that. But I could look into that for sure. I think some kind of a project management software that explains where things are in the process and is an important thing. And whether that's expansion of iWorks or something else is worth looking into.
Okay.
I've worked with actually 3 database systems like that,
Yeah,
and they all have their,
because iWorks doesn't track, iWorks isn't tracking like development. So where would that be, and is that something that we need to be looking at?
If you wanted to add money for that, is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? It'd be in professional and technical services probably.
And the price on that could range so drastically that we might just have to do an adjustment if we found something that we wanted.
Well, I want to make sure that the planning department has all of the support that you need to be able to be successful.
that's great. I'm still kind of assessing that. But there's some things that I have thoughts about, and then also the development of the software is something I'd like to look at.
Well, if that's then good for now, but an adjustment later, then I think it's worth it to say. Also,
Yeah,
in
I
our,
need to look at the iWorks module to see what it does. I don't know what it does.
The iWorks software, as far as the building permit goes, once the permit is issued, or even maybe during the plan review process, allows people to go online and see where the project's at.
That's a nice feature.
You can pull up what inspections have been done on my project.
this is pre-development, I think is what Mike was
This is-
talking about.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah,
that's,
so that's not
but
iWorks.
iWorks does
Yeah.
have a planning module. I don't know anything about it, but it may be something we could look into so it would tie all of that information into one database.
It would be nice to have one database. I don't know what iWorks is capable of, so.
And then one final thing, that there has been lots of conversation about having the code compliance specialists in the planning department versus in code enforcement.
So the compliance, so I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and it depends on what the compliance officer, in my opinion, it depends on what they're mostly doing. And if they're mostly doing zoning stuff, then they probably should stay with the planning department. If they're doing more nuisance things and noise violations and kind of more general compliance, then it makes sense for it to be in the police department. My experience has been that where it's been in the police department, the police officers aren't really trained, nor should we, I think, expect them to really understand all of the zoning stuff. And in 2 cases, we actually moved, where I've worked, we've moved the code enforcement officer from the police to the planning department. Because it's, you know, it's like giving, the police officers have to learn a whole nother set of stuff that they're not necessarily all that wild about.
However, they're the ones that field the phone calls and.
Some of them, Mona does a lot of that. People call her pretty regularly. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
I'd be interested in seeing the assistant planner job description. Assistant planner.
Okay. You'd like to talk about that, or did you say?
No, I'd just like to see that job description.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
need to, I'm not prepared to talk about it at the moment.
Well, it sounds like that's something you're gonna probably, when you see it, you're gonna assess if that's the correct, yeah. More
And,
info.
you know, with these two positions, you don't know who you're gonna get. And, you know, there's maybe some fluidity there, you know, to try to figure out. I think recruiting down here, as you guys are probably aware, is gonna be, I mean, it takes a unique person in a unique position to be able to come down here and move everything. And so I don't think it'll be they will be the easiest positions to fill. On the other hand, you know, it's definitely a place where people want to go. Just a matter of luring them to be able to move here. Be a little challenging.
Okay.
So for the housing specialist, do you think that is a full-time position working solely on housing issues? Or do you think they'll have a full-time employee might have some surplus capacity? And that might manifest as like perhaps having a little bit more in range in their job description so that they could do other stuff in planning, possibly.
We could certainly look at that. My sense is that as the Walnut Lane project gets going, in terms of the actual development, that's going to be a pretty significant chunk of that individual's time really managing that project, in addition to addressing the stuff that, there are pieces that, you know, things that other staff have been doing that I think could fall into that full-time job. I think of things like, I've been the one dealing with the negotiations with a hotel developer who thought that our Wahoo fee was too high, and so there's been a whole negotiation back and forth and evaluation, and that's something that this person could take on. Managing the housing fund overall and thinking about other ways to expand our program. I think, you know, that could be significant, in addition to, you know, being more proactive around our code evaluation that we've talked about all this time. I think it's a full-time job, but I could also see where there would be related, maybe ancillary duties that you could have that position take on, depending on the workload for these other projects. For sure. But, I mean, that's certainly a job description we could look at revising as well.
All right. Any other budget comments? So we are not moving code compliance specialists out of planning and into police.
This budget does not show that happening, correct?
And the council is in favor of that?
Well, maybe I should ask, Mona's not here to answer, but have the majority of her work been trash, I don't know, or planning-related things? I mean,
It seems like it is, their building or planning, but
That's been a
just, you know,
focus.
me.
That's
my
been
observation.
a focus given to
So then she's in the right spot then by that definition.
Well, except that we're not enforcing another, I mean, I'm careful with what I say here, but that we have had other things brought, but the focus has been more of, well, you grabbed your microphone because you were anxious to say something. So
I was gonna say, I mean, it's been a mix. I mean, I think she and a lot of business license related enforcement measures, but those have a real nexus to zoning in a lot of cases. You know, whether it's, yeah, and some of it is, you know, a lot of the stuff that takes a lot of Mona's time is really, I mean, has a land use piece to it in a lot of cases. A lot of these have, you know, it's just hard to say, oh, it's been a zoning question, you know, or it was just a weeds question. Like everything's usually in the mix. They're pretty complicated a lot of times. From my perspective, I think it sends a somewhat, maybe it's a subtle signal, but a somewhat kinder, gentler signal, no offense, to, you know, have the civil code enforcement piece be separate from the criminal code enforcement piece. And that's what you get when you have that position not in the police department per se.
It's confusing on several levels why we have a code enforcement vehicle that our code compliance specialist is not part of that department or drives that vehicle or is enfolded in that existing department in our structure. And then I also want to say too that there is conflict when your planning department is, you know, like there's a relationship that is built between somebody that wants to build an ADU and the planning department. And there can be conflict when there's a position like code compliance that intersects with that, in my opinion, that could produce negative results,
And
like somebody not doing an ADU at all.
Yeah.
Well,
So
if they're not going to do it right, they don't get to do it, right? That's part of it.
Why couldn't
that's
you?
an interesting comment.
I'm just extrapolating, you know, how police officers are supposedly first and foremost public safety. They're there to help you out. If you got a flat tire on the side of the road, there an officer is, and he can help you out. So your code compliance officer could not only be keeping an eye on are things going the way they're supposed to be going, but they could be helpful to the person, you know, say, you know, and be a positive influence as well. So that would help.
But I guess, so back to my question, because I don't think I got an answer from all of you, like comfortable with leaving that in the budget under planning, or did we want to move it?
I mean, I'm good either way, really. I'm just sharing some of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if it's in the police department, you perhaps have some different options in terms of how you enforce. You know.
Whether it's business licensing out of the treasurer's office or zoning out of the planning, or, you know, engineering, like I don't know what would be, where you would use a code compliance specialist out of engineering, or you kind of have your own people.
I don't think we would use a code.
Because you'd beat them.
I don't think we'd use a code enforcement officer in engineering more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, was that something? Well, our construction inspector, basically, so we issue grading permits, kind of in planning world. Grading permits, if someone's not complying with the grading permits, you know, the type of soil, the way they're supposed to install and such, our construction inspector, we just let them know that.
Mm-hmm. So like the converse would be like the building inspector would do that?
He basically, Barry and I work together. We do the dirt work and he does the building work, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having the code enforcement with code enforcement, but that's
I don't know if you've asked my opinion, but I'm going to give it to you, which is, I think it's working pretty well the way it is, and I think it would cause some significant disruption for us to do that. Having said that, we'll do what you tell us.
I'm happy with it as is, but I haven't researched the options. I'm not receiving and feel like the signals might be a little ambiguous, but I'm going to stick with it as it is.
So Mary, you seem to be the one who's the hardest over about the possibility of moving that officer over. What would be, I haven't heard a compelling reason so far. So what would be your argument?
I guess if my reasons that I've already stated don't feel compelling, then you would say you want to keep it as is.
Well, no, they were super clear.
To just be super clear, we have code enforcement. It's in the it's in the police department. We have a vehicle that says code enforcement. And so I would think that the specialist would be the person that would work in that department, that it is beyond just planning, but it's other things. And the fact that the planning department, having somebody in the planning department that is also doing code enforcement can cause friction between people that are in the community that are wanting to do development. So those are the reasons why I think it's worth it for this council to consider, which I think I stated also back in our during our retreat, and it seemed to be that there was thoughts back then as well. So, but if those are not compelling for you, then I would say that I'm asking everybody.
Could we reconsider the issue and say another year and see how it works for a while longer with it?
Well, I mean, we reconsider everything every year in budget
but I mean,
season,
still.
so this is you got to answer now. And,
I'm interested in looking at it sooner than a year, maybe when Nora is more comfortable and we have had.
That's a good point.
That area is staffed, because right now there's a lot of people doing mixed jobs. So if we could have clear definitions of what's happening, I think it'll.
So we would you're suggesting put it on the planning director's purview to decide instead of this council.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Or I could come and make recommendations to you, I don't know.
Okay. 145. What other planning
Capital project.
questions?
Oh, sorry.
Any other, before we're done with planning and inspections and
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
services? 15 minutes of capital projects? Okay, thanks.
What's not to love?
So we don't have, like you were saying, we
That's
don't
okay.
have certain staff to talk about it, but
That's okay. We can get oriented to it and then see what we need to follow up on with you at a future meeting. Let me get my systems booted up. We got
We have
Chuck.
Chuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
what's up, Chuck?
The skies.
Oh, snap. Come on up if you want. Join us.
Come on up,
Come on up,
Chuck.
I Googled that. What are you supposed to say when someone says that?
The sky. All right, so in the Capital Projects Fund, the way we organize it, as you have seen, is we show revenue at the top, and then we show the proposed expenses down below. Just really quickly to talk through the revenue piece, this is where we show transfers also coming in. It's a little bit different this year because, for instance, the lease revenue that we usually get from APMP and the AG's office, et cetera, we're not showing that as revenue into the Capital Projects Fund this year because we are showing that as revenue into the Debt Service Fund because that revenue was always earmarked to help pay off the debt service payment for this building, for the city center building. So that's one example of a change. We showed a little bit of interest income on the account. We do show a $250,000 transfer in from the general fund, and then we show a capital funds, project fund beginning balance of about $900,000 coming in to be spent. So that gives us a pretty, it looks like a really small revenue number compared to last year's budget, but remember last year's budget included 2 or 3 giant projects and included revenue coming in for those projects that wasn't necessarily city revenue, but we had to show it as an income. For instance, like the money that Grand County gave us to help build the Mill Creek West Road up to the campus. It just showed as revenue coming in, but it wasn't exactly like city taxpayer dollars that were being spent there. Anyway, can be a little confusing there. On the expense side, we try to break this out into a format that is groups the expenses by departments or by functions to the degree possible. So we also include in the capital budget the equipment that each of these groups expense, because we show it as a one-time expense, and we can even show some depreciation on some of that. So, for instance, with police, you see numbers there. People make requests. I whittle those requests down. Typically, these do include vehicles, though, that are in here as part of our capital project. So we show that as our lease amount, essentially, for vehicles for the next fiscal year for police. The shooting range remediation, that's one you might consider putting back in there because it's going to be, from what I understand, going to be an ongoing need to fund that over a few years to get our shooting range, basically get the lead out of that shooting range. But I'm going to get more information on that for you because I've gotten sort of evolving information over the last few months about it.
So that's to get the lead out?
As it were. Yes, precisely.
That's funny.
Is that the property that we lease from Sitla?
Yes, it's south of the border, as it were.
Does the county share that same shooting range?
They do use that range, as do other law enforcement agencies. And so I think part of the former chief's thinking was maybe we should be looking to have some of those agencies help offset the expense associated with remediation there. On the public works, in the public works world, this big road improvement number would be if we went ahead and did the project, the Cane Creek project. So there's part of our discussion has been throughout, well, do we defer that project? Do we either finance that project instead? Recent discussions have been a little bit all over the map. One option we have talked about is, do we defer doing the Cane Creek heavy maintenance project until after the 191 widening project is done? Or maybe I should characterize it more as, how do we best time those? Because one argument is, wow, there's going to be more traffic on Cane Creek Boulevard because of the 191 widening project, so should we get to it immediately so that that road's in good shape? Or do we wait and do the Cane Creek project after that project on 191 is done, because it's going to create significant impacts to the Cane Creek section of the road? And so do we just wait till it's completely beat up and basically nothing but dirt and chunky asphalt and then redo the street? So
Did you have a chance to review our deliberation that we had, the conversation that we had at our last budget meeting? Because Jeff had some really interesting perspective that he shared.
I've had discussions with Chuck about it, and I read Rachel's notes, but that's been kind of the extent of it. Was there an outcome of that, or?
Well, from what I recall, I think the council was like, let's do it right, and let's not do it with the 191 project.
So wait to do it?
The catch, though, is the how much triage needs to happen right now, right? Is that?
Yeah,
Does that
I mean,
represent what
but
we-
I was trying to figure out Kaylin's message if with the, green infrastructure. I mean, are you looking, was that for the triage $400,000 budget, or, because I would hate to do all this amazing infrastructure and then it get torn up and 5 years and we're starting.
Right.
again.
So,
Right, well, that's, I mean, I think just, like, I would like to do it right, and that could include green infrastructure. It could also include things that aren't called green infrastructure, that are just, I mean, that are just more, potentially more than just sidewalk, curb, gutter, and pavement. Which might, I don't know what's been designed. We typically don't see those.
Yes.
We budget it and it happens, and,
yeah, although it's spec'd in the general plan though.
pardon?
Yeah, just, things are spec'd in the general plan, overarching.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's time in the, before the 191 widening to have sort of a council engaged design process, and no, didn't think so.
Yeah, may I? Yeah, I mean, so the Cane Creek heavy maintenance project was brought about because of the condition of that road, which includes curb gutter and sidewalk and the storm drains. And the idea was it would get us through until the south trunk line came through. And you asked for some information, and I have that information, I've gotten it.
Okay, thank you.
I haven't sent it yet, I just got it. So that was the idea, was that this was more than a Band-Aid, because it needs more than a Band-Aid. It needs major treatment, but it's not the be-all, end-all for what Cane Creek Boulevard could be 10 years from now or 15 years from now. We didn't focus on green infrastructure like we're focused on the 100 South project, where we did engage council, you know, at some of those, and that's sitting on standby waiting for funding to say go. I mean, that project has got a lot of green infrastructure, I think, involved in it. This project we got a road that's deteriorating, seriously deteriorating. The sidewalks are really in bad shape, and there's a fair amount of pedestrian traffic over there because of those apartments along the way. So no, we didn't spend time on that, and there wouldn't be time to step back and inject green infrastructure into it.
Is the city responsible for sidewalk maintenance?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
they're required to install, and then we're required to maintain
Yes.
sidewalks?
Yeah, new development pays for new sidewalks,
Okay.
and then we're required to maintain. And what Jeff had pointed out was that a lot of the sidewalk damage over there is from trees, their
Right.
root damage.
Mm-hmm.
And he's correct.
If I may, when I'm talking about these possible above minimum improvements, like, I feel like green infrastructure was taken a little bit out of context. Like, I don't necessarily include landscaping as green infrastructure, and like, so there's some trees there, maybe they're the wrong species in the wrong place, and so let's develop a tree replacement plan that meets the needs of that location. And I don't necessarily consider that green infrastructure. It's just, let's do the planting right.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying about
Yeah.
the trees, and we have it in several locations where the sidewalk is, there are low root trees and there are high root trees, and you know the term better than I do, but there are things that need to be addressed, and we need to consciously do that. In fact, what I'm hoping that we can do sometime in the near future is start developing or adopting some green infrastructure practices that we can do on certain projects, as be my recommendation, and other projects not do, because there's just no time. We're just trying to get things done. And so the idea was that we would do the Cane Creek, because it would last somewhere between 7 to 10 years before the south trunk line was needed. Because the south trunk line is a I got the cost estimate updated. It's 6.1 million estimate if it goes down Cane Creek, and we knew we didn't have money, and really we don't need it right now, except to put those properties that are on Cane Creek there, but we don't need it for sewer line capacity that we'll need in 7 to 10 years. So the south trunk line does two things. It allows people along Cane Creek Boulevard to hook up, but it also primarily was to provide the increased capacity that we'll need for the region, including the city, over the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So Cane Creek, just because
This is just road work.
yeah,
Well, it's curb and gutter though.
It's all related.
it is all related. It's
Road.
yeah. When I say this is under 500,000 for road work, and we also had another
500 in C, in Class C.
Class C. So it would be storm drain. And that's what I talked about last time. Potentially, we could do the storm drain, curb gutter, and sidewalk now. if we didn't have time to get the road in, then let the road deteriorate, though if we let deteriorate, I mean, I don't know who said let it go to dirt, I don't know if you said that,
That's dramatic.
That was true,
That was very dramatic. Yeah.
I mean, I understand the concept, it's just that, boy, the phones will come off though.
Right.
Right, and
They
so
will come off the hook if we do any construction during the 191 widening.
Truth, yeah.
So I think we need to be very careful when we do this project, and I am gonna just speak up and recommend that. Oh, okay. Okay, it's just 1:57, 3 more minutes. The recommendation is to wait a year for that.
So the critical thing is getting the pavement through the 191 widening, correct? But you're talking about that as like, maybe there won't be time to, because first
Not to do it correctly, the plans we have show that some of that pavement gets repaved, some of it gets double shot chip seal.
Even if there's orange buckets out there.
But what we'll have to do is if we, and I'm not trying to talk
People are
you into
gonna
either one,
barf.
but I want to make you aware that if we don't do these improvements, we will see an increase in traffic, so we should bump up some maintenance money. Because that's what UDOT had to do for 191. They thought they'd get away with not having to maintain it this year. They did. They went out and put a bunch of cold mix down. We'll need to do the same. You know, maybe 50, 60 grand.
Just filling
something.
potholes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I just want to make you aware that if we don't do the project, we'll have to do some more
Well, I
maintenance
think
on it.
that's reasonable. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a proponent for doing curbs and gutters, and then in 6 years, 8 years, we're redoing the road properly. I mean, that's $500,000 to, that's,
The curb gutter and sidewalk probably wouldn't need to be replaced.
it
but-
wouldn't,
No,
okay.
but the road surface itself would, because we're not going to, under the current plans, we're not going to replace all the road surface. It's just the worst spots.
Man, that's an important point. Like, if we didn't have any trunk line issues, if the trunk line was a non-thing,
Right.
we would probably be proposing a full reconstruction of this road, which is going much further down, much more expensive, right? I mean, instead, we're saying, well, if we want to get it through the next 5 to 10 years, this is the cheaper approach, knowing that we have to go back in and do that road construction at some point in the next, after 10 years.
Yeah, and I think what I'm just saying is, let's just kick it 1 year
Okay.
because of 191.
I-
That's what I'm saying.
kick it, well, what do you mean kick it?
Postpone it until.
Do the necessary pothole filling,
Yeah.
and then once 191 is widened, work on Cane Creek.
Right, and yeah, so what I'm wondering is, like, what would it look like to maintain the pavement so that it stands up to the 191 period, and might give time to look at what do we want Cane Creek to be
Right.
long-term?
Yeah.
And then, like, maybe do the concrete work that won't be disrupted by the south trunk line sooner, and maybe additional pavement maintenance, and figure out the sequencing.
Yeah, I think that's, so
Okay.
then that would
But does that make
change
sense?
the number. That would change the number in the budget then.
Definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. I think we could do that. I mean, if we come back and we'll put it together timeframes and everything and let you guys look at it to see if it's what you really mean. Do the concrete work that won't be throwaway concrete work.
Right.
But that also won't disrupt the road, but a light maintenance treatment is what I'm hearing you say it to it now, fill the potholes to get us through the 191, because it's really gonna take a beating, what's
Yeah.
out there
Yeah,
now.
so Chuck, if you could put a timeline together all the way through the south trunk line, any work research, then it'll give me a better, big picture view.
And then it'll give you time to look at the plans too and see if
Yeah,
there's some other things you
it'd
want to
be
do.
great. And then I can make a better decision about when to do the paving and so on.
Okay.
And also promise Kalen that he's drawing me into the green infrastructure argument. I just need to get smarter about it before I can decide.
Well,
who's
now
right.
that you mention that, so I have a friend who I actually went to high school with that serves on the Green Infrastructure Council. And she's also an accomplished engineer with Arup. So she's offered to come and do a workshop with us about green infrastructure if we're interested, which I think would be really.
And you can sit in the audience and say, but here, this won't work if you.
No, I use that stuff. I've used it before I ever got here. It's just you have to be cautious where you use it, in my opinion. It's
And do
appropriate in some places, in
cost-benefit
some places
analysis,
it's
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for clarity, I just want to say that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Chuck. We did it. We got through our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to.
Second.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.